Hi, I'm Jason Grove for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to look at the B&W AM1s.
Big shelf.
Outdoor speakers, what better way of annoying your neighbor than blaring music? I've had lots of opportunities to try out different outdoor speakers, but of course, as somebody who's a huge B&W fan, Bowers & Wilkins powers almost my entire sort of main listening stage. It was an amazing opportunity to be able to actually try these out for a couple months, sitting here in the deck, sometimes when the sun goes down, fire table, etc., and just be able to actually chill and listen to music. Obviously, we can listen to with headphones, we can do all kinds of other stuff like that, but there's something about a space-filling sound that is definitely the way to go. Each of these, you can see sort of towards the camera, is towed in. This gives the opportunity of creating, for me, what I want, which is a relatively narrow sound stage. Usually these are sort of mounted so that they completely diffuse to actually create sort of an area for people as they wander around the lawn. But really what I've done is I've created an outdoor listening stage. And that's something that these particular speakers are extremely, extremely excellent at. So the AM1 or Bowers & Wilkins outdoor speaker, their architecture series, as it were, the way that it works is that there's actually drivers in the front and there's a bass radiator on the back. I've had these Paradigms for years, and the Paradigms have worked really, really well for me. There's a very different construction though. If you actually look under the plate here, you can see that it's like sort of a main driver, very dusty because it's been outdoors for years and years, and aluminum tweed on the top. And then they have these screws on the top and a sort of a C-clamp that sort of spans the top and the bottom. And that allows you to sort of rotate it in this direction, which allows me to sort of set what I prefer, which is a much more directional sound for my main listening position. The Paradigms therefore have all of the sound energy sort of going in this direction, which is fundamentally in my space what I kind of need. These Bowers & Wilkins are exceptional, but in my space they're a bit of a compromise, because for the fact of the matter is, while the drivers on the front are certainly directional, this bass radiator needs to bounce off of something, and you can see that I don't have much that it's bouncing off. If these were a more permanent sort of installation, I might consider actually putting up a plate here, blocking some of my view of my neighbors. That's a whole nother consideration to make. For right now, these are sort of in place, and I've had to adjust the bass equalization on my Class D amp in order to provide a little bit more bottom end. I certainly get more bottom end out of the Paradigms than I do these. That's not a fault of the speaker, that's a fault of the position where they're actually going to go. On the other side, I do have it against a wall, but of course, it's at the end of a wall, so again, it's sort of out into empty space. Which brings the fundamental thing about when you're actually testing speakers, it really has to do a lot about what the room is. One of the reasons that headphones can be so extraordinarily so fantastic in some of their sound reproduction is they know the sort of general space. Sure, everybody's got different ears and everybody's got slightly different spacing, but the fact of the matter is you only have this much space that you really have to worry about. That's why you can get headphones that cost several $100s or $1,000 or several $1,000s that rival speakers that sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, because the physics of moving air is completely different when it's a small space versus a big space. And is there a bigger space than the outdoors? So these are having to move air out in the air. It doesn't have walls to bounce off of, but it does mean that you have certain frequency responses that are going to be better than others, and certainly bass is going to be a challenge outdoors. And normally for these, their solution is to bounce the bass off of the surface, because primarily these are either wall mounted on the side or under the soffit or under the sort of overhanging on your wall architecture. The fact of the matter is that this is what I have to do for my setup. So for me, I have to goose the bass just a little bit in order that these are working a little bit harder than they probably should, but I still have a little bit of bottom end, a little bit of impact without completely obliterating the sound, but also without completely pissing off my neighbors even more than I already do. So the specifications, as the plane's going off, it's okay, you guys get to listen to that. Dimensions, the height is 310 millimeters or 12 inches or so. The width is 7 inches or 180 millimeters, and the depth is 210 millimeters or 8¼ inches. The weight is, these weigh about 8.8 pounds or 4 kilograms. They have a Nautilus tube-loaded aluminum dome tweeter. I kind of love that they're naming everything after Nautilus. That's the sort of way that they actually deal with the shape, but that sort of echoes their very high-end Nautilus speakers. Glass fiber cone base mid-range driver. Fiberglass, in other words. And then they have the auxiliary base radiator, which is that thing. So there is obviously a driver. There's a two-way driver here, just like there's in the Paradigm, but it's a much smaller driver. And then for low base impact, that's what the ABR or auxiliary base radiator is for. It's a two-way system with ABR, as it describes, with the two drive units. The frequency range, -6 decibels at 46 hertz and 50 kilohertz or when it's wall mounted. And they emphasize wall mounted on that because they need that to actually produce that kind of impact. On reference axis wall mounted, they say there's a 51 hertz to 22 kilohertz reference. I mean, that's anechoic. That's going to be crazy. Certainly you're not going to get that outdoors. But the 86 decibel sensitivity is a big deal because it means you can drive it, and distortion is less than 1%. Of course, it's going to have a ton of distortion compared to sort of more robust speakers. But nominal impedance is 8 ohms, and that's a big deal. It means it is very easy to drive regular 8 ohm thing, and it's not like, unlike my big monster B&Ws that dip down, I think 3 ohms occasionally at load. These are going to be very easy to drive, even in series. The sound of them is excellent, unsurprisingly. Slightly tweaked sort of upper mid, the dome tweeter does a really nice job of cutting through and creating a decent soundstage. I have these towed to listening position. That is the way I prefer it. I'm basically creating an outdoor monitor situation, which I actually kind of prefer. But the fact of the matter is that I could angle these in a slightly less towed situation, create a much more diffuse sound, but I prefer when I'm listening to something that's sort of monophonic. When the vocals are coming from right from the center, I love that sensation of the sort of phantom center. I listen to mono music, or I listen to sort of recordings, especially from the 1970s, where they would do that. They would sort of lock the sound right in the middle for vocals, and then have this really nice diffuse sound system. I've tried everything from, electronic music. Madonna's Ray of Light is sort of a go-to. Peter Gabriel is sort of a go-to. Some sort of classic 80s hip-hop, symphonic works, but the stuff that I really love listening to this, obviously podcasts or whatever, they're all fine, but what I love listening to this is obviously sort of semi-acoustic stuff. Nick Drake, for example, that kind of stuff really shines. There's a real warmth and a really feeling, especially when you have the fire going, that you're sort of at a fireside concert. It's quite lovely. So these have a relatively unique mounting system. You basically have to use a sort of like star key, and underneath you have just a regular bolt with this sort of fancy pattern and a washer. And if you unscrew this, it just takes a second. As I do it carefully. You basically have, a single bolt and a single washer. And with this, what it allows you to do is to take the speaker off. And you can see in the end, it's just like this sort of both male and female sort of metal connector. And on the actual unit itself, on here, it's also metallic. What it allows you to do is that's what's creating a absolute waterproof seal, and then there's no actual speaker wires going in the speaker itself. All of that is sort of contained within the bracket. That did mean when I was setting it up that I had to sort of mount the bracket. I tried doing this sort of temporarily so that I could still sort of compare directly my paradigms to the powers. That was impossible. I had to wall mount them. So if you're thinking of just using them in a place where you can just sort of put them somewhere, it doesn't work there. Doesn't work that way. There's no sort of a tripod mount or anything like that. Normal speaker stand mount, they will not stay that way. So that gives us an opportunity to sort of look a little bit more in detail at this. You can see the bass driver on the back. Very nice, very compact. And again, they can be mounted this way. The bracket will actually allow you to do that, of course, where the angle of rotation is here. And of course I have it here, which is how the sound is actually working that way. If you look at this guy, see if I can pull this off without too much drama. There's a small flap here, and this flap underneath actually is where your speaker connectors are. So I have a wire coming up, and there's my red and black cables. And this, again, is totally water sealed and weather sealed right against here. It's extremely well engineered, and it allows us to very easily take the speaker on and off if we wish to, but this mount itself can actually be stayed and left in the weather. They're completely weatherproof at the best of times, and so you would absolutely be able to leave these out in the winter, just like I do with my other speakers, which is recommended. You wouldn't want this sort of metal stuff to sort of be exposed to the elements too much. It's actually better, the thing that's actually designed to be in the elements, for it to sort of be mounted on top like this. To put it back on, it's obviously just a simple matter of putting the bolt back in. You can hand tighten it and then use the available chuck to actually make it work. In terms of sound, in terms of how it actually reproduces these elements, it does an extraordinary job. And as I said, just like with the other side, I have a little bit of wall here, but I got nothing over here. So this bass driver is bouncing a little bit off of this, but not sufficient for what these speakers are absolutely capable of. I did try turning this one around just so I could hear how it sounds when it's actually bouncing off this wall, and immediately the improvement was obvious. The fact of the matter is, these really are designed that these are very capable drivers. They will absolutely produce bass frequencies, but it's this bass diffuser really wants to do a bunch of work. So as I said before, if I was to permanently mount these, I would have some sort of way, some sort of board here probably for the sound to actually bounce off. And then what I'm doing is I'm tuning not only the way that we tune our rooms when we have in our home theater or two-channel listening room, now I'm tuning outdoors, which does seem a little bit psychotic. So the fact of the matter is that outdoor speakers are something that, you just, if you have the space for it, it's something to add. Obviously, I could be listening to headphones. Obviously, I have a pair of just Bluetooth speakers that we could throw up if I just wanted some background noise. But I love music enough that this is something that's very important to me. And that to be able to sit out here, to have the fire on, and to be able to listen to music through these is an absolute, absolute joy. I love these speakers. I love the sound that they produce. I do wish that I didn't have the limitation of having these bass drivers sort of be underdeveloped. They certainly sound better than my paradigms for the high and mid frequencies, but for the bass, I am lacking a little bit on this because of my setup. And that's indicative of how speakers, you can have the best speakers in the world, you can spend a fortune on speakers, and if the room and the position isn't sufficient for what it actually needs to be, if you have to make compromises, the speakers can only do what they're actually engineered to do. And these ones are absolutely engineered to be against a wall or against the underside of your, on the soffit or whatever element on your roof. They are not designed like this to work outdoors and be completely directional towards the listener. They're expecting sound to bounce off. And because of that, these may not be the ultimate sort of product for my listening. Unfortunately, when I went back to the paradigms, I was missing those other frequencies so much. So what I've done by dialing in, by making the bass a little bit goosed on the amplifier end to give me a little bit of that low bass back, this is still my preferred listening mode. They're really, really lovely speakers, and I would absolutely love to have them in my listening mode. Unfortunately, this pair actually has to go back. It's been an absolute pleasure to have them for review. Such a compromise to go back to the paradigms. I know the paradigms are great, but these have been a real joy to actually be able to experience, because it's one of those things. I mean, one of the things in this hobby is like you're always imagining what if. And I knew I had the pretty decent, I had sort of the 3/4 outdoor speakers, and I know that for many, these are the top of the top. This is about as good as you're going to get for outdoors, unless you get completely stupid and actually build an outdoor framed space, then you stop being outdoors. But the Bowers name, for many people, means the absolute utmost in audio quality. For others, they're like, oh, if you're just throwing your name on an outdoor speaker, is it really going to live up to the expectations that we have from their extraordinary line of actual speakers and headphones? And I'm extremely pleased to say it does. It is definitely a premium item, especially for outdoors, but it's one of those things you're probably less likely to foots with these than with your sort of indoor speakers. You kind of want to have these as a set it or forget it. And given how robust it's built, given how well it's engineered, I love the sort of plop it on and adjust it that way, not have any wires going through. The wires sort of are stable against the bracket. These are, I think, extraordinary outdoor speakers for you to take a listen to, either this summer up here in this part of the world, or if you're lucky enough to live somewhere where it's warm all along, I think that these are something that you definitely should check out. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. I'd really encourage you to give these a shot. Let me know in the comments if you had a chance to actually listen to these or another pair of outdoor speakers and what your experience is watching stuff outdoors. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.